Hi, good morning guys, thanks for joining me. Hope everyone's well. Got myself a nice cup of tea. What I thought we'd do in today's video is talk a little about leatherwork again. I had a few inquiries after the last giveaway, just regarding the little pouches what I make and the ones which are used on the Flint and steel set. So I thought I'd just come out and just show you how I make them, and also talk about a few of the different sorts which I do make and the kind of things which I keep in them. Very simple project, certainly if you're just starting off with leatherwork, you just need small amounts, you know, give you scrap bits of leather, anything like that. And at the end of the day, you know, they do come in very useful. But just before we start the video, I just want to show you just a nice little surprise when I turned up at camp. I'll just pan the camera around here and just show you now. And when I got here, there was a little note stuffed just under one of the bricks here. And a nice little surprise, you've got Mark written just on the front of it. And just quickly reading it, it says, "Hi Mark, seems as though I stumbled across your camp. I hope you don't mind, but I made myself a cup of coffee and chilled out in my hammock. Anyway, keep up the great work on the channel. Maybe I could get a shout out. Your subscriber, Tim." So thanks a lot, Tim. Absolutely brilliant, mate. Just unfortunate that I wasn't in camp at the same time. Would have had a nice cup of tea with you. So I'm just going to fold that up and just keep that in the rucksack. So nice little surprise, and thank you very much. So just getting back to the leatherwork. Like I mentioned, these are the kind of things which you're going to make. This is what I refer to as a two-fold pouch. Basically just one piece of leather, just folded over twice. Like I was saying, you can make them any size. That's the one which I tend to use for the flint and steel. I've got a couple of those in different sorts of leather. I've actually got a larger version there, which I keep just a small field sharpening kit in. And these ones here, I'm just using just to store these UCO matches. Again, these are just little scraps, and I thought I'd just put them to some kind of use. So again, you know, very simple to make. I'm just going to run through the tools, just show you the leather, that kind of thing, and we're going to get one made. So the leather which we're going to use for today's project, we're going to use one of these pieces of bull hide. And when it comes to selecting your leather, you want to look for something that's nice and durable, but at the end of the day, something that's quite flexible as well. Because if you're going to be making a pouch, you're going to have to fold it, and also if you're going to be putting items in it, you want it to expand. But also if you're going to be making things like flint and steel sets, you want the leather to be tough enough that the flint itself doesn't actually cut through the leather. So there's two different sorts here. One of it is a smooth waxy finish, and the other one is a rustic leather. I do like this rustic leather with all the natural growth grains just on the front there. And when it comes to buying your leather, I actually purchased this from the Identity store. I will leave all the links in the description box. And anything like this you're going to pay around about £15 to £20 for. So in the past I've actually made these little pouches out of different leather. That one there is a honey tan. Again, it's a veg tan leather, nice and durable, and they do last a long time. And just showing you one there which I finished off the other day. I might use the similar kind of thread. That's the same leather as that leather there, and the thread which we used on it was a tan thread. And we just use this rustic nickel or an antique nickel little popper. And again, when it comes to fastening the little pouches, it's down to yourself. You could use a buckle, you could use a popper, you could perhaps put a couple of holes in it to just tie it just with a little leather lace. You know, that's entirely down to yourself. So when it comes to selecting the leather, I think we're going to go with this nice rustic piece. I do like the pattern on that, and I can perhaps save this larger sheet here for another project when I need larger pieces of leather. So the selection of tools which I brought out for today's project, I've just put just on the cutting board here. And like I mentioned in past videos, you don't need this selection of tools, just as long as you've got somewhere marking the leather, cutting the leather and stitching the leather, then at the end of the day you're going to be fine. But I tend to find, you know, just having the right tools for the job, it just makes it just a little bit easier and the end result just a little bit neater. So just starting off at the back here, I've just got some Leathercraft cement, and this is the PVA glue. I do like the PVA glue. It is a strong holding glue, but also if you need to clean it off anything, whether it's off your tools or whether you need to clean it off the leather, it does come off quite easily. Just something just to cut the thread, so just a cheap little pair of snips. And just running alongside the leather itself, we've got the metal work, and for this project here we're going to use these line 20s, and this is the antique nickel. So running alongside that, we're going to need some way of actually putting it into the leather or setting it into the leather, so you can get specific little tools. So one side being the anvil and the other side being the die, and I'll show you how that works in a while. Just a couple of clamps here, just so that we can hold the leather together just while the glue's drying, and some kind of punch, just so that we can actually punch it so we can get the little poppers to fit. This here is a little stitch awl, slightly different than a round awl. When you actually punch that through the leather, it does leave a diamond shape, and it just allows the stitching just to be a little bit neater. Some way of just marking the leather and measuring the leather, so just a couple of steel rules, and the needles which we're going to sew everything up with. is a proper leather worker's needle, and these are saddler's harness needles. It's not a sharp needle. A lot of people kind of think, you know, that leather needles must be sharp. They're actually quite blunt, because the holes which we're going to be using to do the stitching with, we're going to actually put in just one of these little stitch irons, and these needles are a size 4. And then the thread which we're going to use, I've actually brought a couple of different sorts of thread out. I've got the round thread, I do like that colour, and I do like the thread itself. I've also brought out just a spool of flat thread. I'm probably going to go just with this tan coloured thread. It is a nice thread, and like I say, it is a good thread to buy and a good thread to use. So that's pretty much everything, you know, there. Anything else I will run through as I'm making the pouch. There's a couple of smaller items just on the little bag just down by the side of me. Like I said, I'll show you in a minute. So the first thing we've got to do is put the leather out. We've just got to mark it and cut it, and then we can start sticking everything together and getting into these tools a bit more and getting them used. So the kind of pouch which we're going to make today, we're going to make it big enough so we can put just another flint and steel set into it. Like I say, when it comes to making these kind of pouches, you can make them whatever size it is that you want to make them. Just anything like this small little match pouch there, all the way, like I showed you earlier, to this little field sharpening kit. All made in exactly the same kind of manner. You know, it's all glued the same way, it's all cut the same way. The only difference being is just the size of what you cut the leather. Like I mentioned, it's called a two-fold pouch because we're going to fold the leather twice. And the beauty about it is, it means then that the bottom of the pouch can actually expand. If we're using two separate pieces of leather and actually sewing along the bottom there, you sometimes find that the bottom is very, very tight, and you have a job, you know, putting quite bulky items in it and allowing the pouch to expand. So when it comes to measuring things, I'm just going to measure just the size of the steel itself, and then I tend to go 10mm either side of that. It's going to give you room then for the stitching to run up the sides, and also it's going to allow the leather to expand, you know, when you've got your tinder in there, and also when you've got your flint in there with it. So the little steel itself is 70mm, so we're going to make this 90mm wide, and when it comes to cutting the length, again, you know, that can be down to how big you want the pouch. But these we tend to do around about 200mm, 210mm, and it's a nice little size then to keep in the pocket, and it's big enough to store all the items in. So we're just going to measure just the 90mm across, and just try to get it right first time. And then when it comes to cutting, you just try and make it just one movement all the way down. And there's no turning back now, that's the leather cut. So when it comes to making the second cut, I'm just going to determine the size just by laying the steel just on the leather itself, and then we're just going to make just the first fold, and then you can determine how much leather it is that you want just above the steel itself when it's actually pushed into the pouch. And then the second fold will come over there, and that's going to be the little closure flap. So like I was saying, these are anywhere between 200mm, 210mm, something like that, but obviously it'll be determined by the size of the steel that you're using, and also the amount of stuff that you want to pack in. So I'm quite happy with that. So just making sure that everything's squared up, you can just use something just like a little steel rule, just marking the back side of the leather. I'm just going to make just a little line down there, just so I've got some kind of rough guide, and then I'm going to get a true measurement for when it cuts. So we're probably going to cut 45mm off this, just be on the safe side, and if we need to trim any more off later, we could do that. So that's the leather cut to size. Now the first little job which you've got to do is determine where we're going to pop a hole for one of the poppers. So to do that, I'm just going to lay the steel back on the leather and fold over just the front flap. Just checking there that the measurements are right. Like I said, we probably just have to trim just probably 5mm off the top of that, but that isn't too much of a problem. So I'm quite happy with the fold there. I'm quite happy with the amount of leather covering the steel. So it's just a case of just finding the centre point, which would be 45mm, and then we just need to come down just a little bit. So we're just going to use just the awl. I'm just going to place just a tiny little mark just on the leather there. That's where we're going to punch the hole. And to do that, I've just got one of these little rotary punches. These aren't very expensive, you can pick these up for around about £5 and they will come with various different size punches, and it is a nice quick easy way to do it. So just pop in just a little piece of scrap leather just underneath, just making sure that the punch lines up with that hole, or what's going to be the hole, and you just push down and it punches out the leather and collects just a little offcut just in the centre of the punch there. So now we're going to put in one of the little poppers. When you buy these poppers, they come with the caps and they also come with the back sides. So just making sure that we put the right one on the right side. So basically males and females, we just put that post through the leather, just so that it comes out all the way, and then you've just got the other little section which goes over the top. Now it's just a case of just banging that post so it mushrooms over. That's pretty much what grips one of these poppers to the leather. So the tool which we're going to use to set the popper, that's this one here, and it's made by Tandy Leather. And it's basically a multi-set. You get all the different punches, you also get the dies and the anvil. And this little tool goes from everything from the small little poppers for gloves all the way up to the size 24s. Then the back side has a striking side for when it comes to knocking this section in, just on that flat part of the popper there. So we're just going to place it down just on a nice flat surface. Then you've just got the other tool there which will hold everything in place. And it's just a case now of striking down, just flaring that post over. And that there is that little popper set. And what you can do is just twist it, just make sure that it's secure, and that is quite secure. And a nice quick way of setting these little poppers. Okay, so the next job is just to start gluing just the sides of the pouch. So again, we're just going to make sure that we're happy with everything at the moment. So I may just take it up to there, just a little bit higher than what I originally thought, and that way then I don't have to trim anymore just off the top. There's also a little bit of room there just at the top, just for storing, like I said, a bigger piece of flint and also your tinder. So again, just folding it over, just making sure everything's squared up, and again just using the little rule, we can just make just two shallow little marks, again just on the back side, and that's where we're going to run the glue all the way up the edge there, just meeting up with that little mark. So for the glue, like I said, it says PVA glue, and I've just got a little spatula here, so we're just going to put just a bit just on this bit of scrap leather, and then you don't need too much glue. The more you put on, the more it's going to squeeze out everywhere. So I just like to put just a little bit just on the spatula, and then like I say, we're just going to work up all the way to that mark. Then I don't tend to take it all the way up to the top, because when I push the leather together, there's a good chance a little bit will squeeze out and actually fill that bit of a gap in anyway. So just taking the time and just running it just along the edge. And the same just on the other side. When you squeeze the leather together, this is what I was referring to about using the PVA glue. It's nice and clean if it is that you need to take away any kind of excess. And then what we're going to do is just hold that just with the little clamps until it dries. So for that I use these little pieces of paper. It just stops the clamps from marking the leather. And I've just got these little cheap little plastic little clamps, but they do work quite well. So I'm just going to clamp one side and then the other. just like so. And this glue doesn't take too long to dry, probably around about 45 minutes, and it should be secure enough to stitch. So we'll just put that down and just leave that glue to dry, and I'll just make myself another quick cup of tea. Okay, so after half a cup of tea, I've let that for around about 30 minutes. And we'll just see now that this glue is dried. And that there doesn't seem too bad. So we'll just clear away some of the stuff just off the board here. Just give us a little bit of room to work in. So the next thing which we've got to do is just to mark the leather, which is where we're going to stitch. And there's various different ways which you can do it. You can just measure it with a rule and just punch it straight through with an awl. But for this we're just going to use these wing dividers, and like I was saying, these little stitch irons. So the rough rule of thumb which I like to go by is the thickness of the leather. We can just set the wing dividers at, and then it's just a case of just putting one edge on one side of the leather, the other on the leather itself, and then we're just going to run it down, and I'll just create just a little straight line for us. I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up there, but it just gives us a good mark which we can stitch to. So once you've actually put the marks in, then like I was saying, we're going to use these little stitch irons. We're just going to put just another scrap piece of leather down, then it's just a case of making sure that everything's nice and straight. Just putting the stitch iron just on the line itself, and then we're just going to use the mallet again, and we're just going to knock it through and punch the holes in. So the next thing we're going to do now is just get the thread and the needles ready. I've also got the little stitch hole there, just in case I need to push it through and just make them holes just a little bit cleaner. But usually when you use these little stitch irons, you know, you just put it straight through the leather, and the hole itself is usually a nice clean hole all the way through the leather. So for the stitching we're going to use two needles. We're going to use what's referred to as a saddle stitch. It's a very strong stitch, and I've also got a stitch pony just down by the side of me there, which is what we're going to use to hold the piece of leather in. So when it comes to measuring the length of the thread, rough rule of thumb is either 4 or 5 times the length of the stitch itself. So we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll make it 5, just make sure that we've got enough thread. And when it comes to threading the eye of the needle, I'm just going to push the thread through, and then to lock it in position, this little tag end here, we're just going to push the needle up through the centre of the thread, just like so. Not sure the camera's picking that up. Then you can pull that back over the needle and then pull that up, and that'll lock it off, and that'll stop it from pulling out of the needle when you're sewing. So we're just going to do that on the other side, and then that's the needle and thread set up, and then we're just going to bring the stitch pony over. I'm just going to make a start stitching the piece of work. So the stitch pony which we're going to be using, it's only a cheap one, it's only a small one. You can pick these up from Amazon or eBay, anywhere from around about £15 or £20. Very simple in construction, so if it is that you're any good at woodwork, I'm sure you can make your own. And the way that they work, you've got this nut and bolt here, and as you tighten it up in one direction, at the top of the jaws close too, and with this one here, I've just glued a couple of pieces of leather onto it, just to stop it marking the work. And then I just like to put it in between my legs, and you just sit on it and get nice and comfortable. So the work itself, when we're going to sew it, we're going to be making sure that the stitch itself is finished off at the top. So we're going to start the stitching down at the bottom of the pouch here. So it's the case when we place it into the jaws that the bottom of the pouch is actually facing away from us. So just going to open it up, place it in position, and then tighten the jaws up. That's nice and secure now. I've got both hands free so I can use both the needles. And it makes it nice and secure, and it does make it quite a lot easier when it comes to the stitching. So I'll just pan the camera in just a little bit closer, just so we can see just how we do the saddle stitch. For those of you that perhaps haven't seen it done before, I will leave some links to some good leather working videos, you know, where they're showing you how to do the saddle stitch. And they also got some good camera angles just to make things easier to see. So we're just going to start off just by putting the needle straight through, and then we're going to pull both needles up so that thread is the same either side. So like I said, we're just going to pan the camera in now, just get you close up on these holes, and I'll just explain just a little bit about the saddle stitch now that we're going to start the stitching. So the first thing which we're going to do, like I say, we just even the thread up, making sure that we've got the same amount on either side. We're just going to push one of the needles half the way through the work like so, and then with the other needle in the other hand, we're going to put that at the back of the needle. I know it's probably looking like the front of the needle from your angle, but from my angle, yeah, this is at the back of the needle. Then we're going to pull it through, lift it up, and that stretches the hole just a little bit, and that's going to allow us then just to push the other needle through the same hole, just like so. And then what we can do is throw this loop over the needle, pull through, and draw both of them nice and even, and that there is the first stitch done. And that's basically tied a little knot just in the thread itself, so if you do actually cut one of these threads, that they shouldn't unravel and your piece of work shouldn't come undone. So again, push the needle halfway through the hole, get the other needle, just place it at the back of the other needle, pull through, lift the thread up, and then through the same hole, I'm just going to push that other needle through, drop the thread over the top, pull that through, and then we're just going to draw both of them nice and even and pull nice and secure. And that there is a couple of the threads just started off. I'll just pan the camera around now just so you can see the other side. So we're going to push it halfway through, needle behind the other needle, pull through, lift the thread up, and then through the same hole we're going to push that other needle, drop that loop of the thread over the needle, and just pull through. And as you pull both of those nice and evenly, that thread there is actually tied into a knot. And once you've done this a few times, it's quite easy. You can pick your speed up. It doesn't take too long to get into it and do these kind of pouches, roughly around about 25 minutes, and then, like I said, a bit of time for the glue to set. So these little pouches themselves, you know, don't take very long at all to make. And then when it comes to the final stitch, we're just going to repeat the same process. but this time we're going to lock it off. There's a couple of ways which you could do it. If it was a knife sheath or something where there's going to be a lot of pressure just on the top of the sheath here, you can actually come back down and probably repeat the process 2 or 3 stitches down. But for these little pouches, we're just going to get the needle just on the front side of the work. We're just going to push that just back through the same hole, and we're going to pull that stitch all the way through. So now both pieces of thread are on the back side of the work. Then we can just remove that from the stitch pony. Now it's just a case of just snipping off the thread there, and then we can just use a cigarette lighter and just blob it down. And that there is the finished stitch. Nice and neat, nice and secure. Now it's just a case of just doing the same just on the other side. Okay, so that's the pouch now stitched up. Stitching doesn't look too bad on the front, also the back. Just checking there, the stitching's nice and secure. So the next little job which we've got to do, we've got to put the other half of the popper on. So for that I'm just going to fold the flap over, just making sure that everything's nice and square, and then we're just going to push down just on the surface of the leather, and then the other part of the press stud there will make that little mark for us. So all we've got to do now is punch the leather through. I've got the tools here, another part of the press stud, so we'll just get that done. It doesn't take a few seconds. So this time, instead of using the flat anvil side, we're going to use one of the recesses, and like I say, these are at line 20, that's the 20 there. So the idea behind this is that will now fit inside there, and it grips it nice and secure. It stops it getting damaged, as it is that you mushroom over that little post on the inside again. So just the same procedure as last time. And after a few taps, just checking again how we did with the other side, just making sure that it doesn't actually spin around. And that there is the pouch pretty much finished off. If you wanted to round the corners off, it's very simple. You could just use something like a coin, a 2p coin, something like that. You just place it on the corner of the leather and just get your Stanley knife or your box cutter and just cut out the shape. I'm just going to leave that as it is. I'm quickly just going to sand down the edges here just to make things nice and flush and just get rid of that glue which is just on the outside of the leather there. You can pretty much call that done. And there we have one flint and steel set and a nice little pouch. So again, you can just keep that in your fire kit, you could keep that in your pocket, everything's contained and all kept together. And like I say, found about half an hour's worth of work, not too bad at all. A nice little project, nice and simple if it is that you're just starting off leather work. And again, you don't need a great deal of tools, and you also don't need a great deal of leather. Well guys, it looks like we timed that well. It looks like there's a storm starting to blow in, so it'll just give me time now just to get all the tools packed away, get myself out of the woods. So like I say, anyone that's interested in these little projects, dead easy to do. I will leave all the links in the description box for the tools and also the leather. So like always, it just seems to say thanks a lot for stopping by and watching the video. Like always, until next time, you take care and I'll see you again.